what in God's great earth was I doing? And I think it gives me a foretaste of what it says, I believe it's in 2 Timothy, about the great delusion and falling away, that when that hits, I have a kind of a foretaste of how strong that delusion can be. Because I look back and think, I cut off my male genitalia? I can't believe I did that.
For a medical convention, for example, and there are leaders talking about the how much money a doctor or a hospital can bring in through these surgeries, and they are just looking at the numbers, baby, and they are raking in they're raking in the money through children that are confused, adults who are confused in the medical field, in the pharmaceutical arena, in the mental health arena, who are just making money hand over fist over these poor kids that are confused. And it's this desire to see this massively growing market for the sake of more and more money.
Where in the medical field do you prescribe something that increases suicide, that cuts body parts off? You don't do that. And why? I just want to scream, why are we doing this? Because it makes no sense.
If they have a desire not to do that and they come looking for help, we believe that they ought to be able to find that by in a supportive talk therapy session with a licensed, well-equipped counselor, or in prayer with a pastor or friend or somebody in the body of Christ. And here we have a whole country that has outlawed that. And there are plenty of people in the U.S. who would love to outlaw that as well, and try to silence the truth that Jesus Christ is still transforming lives today.
I can't undo the bone that was shaved from my face. I can't undo the bone they took off here and other things like that. You can't undo that. And I was...
Would you explain a little bit more about that, Ted? I was going to ask, I don't know much about facial feminization. So you just mentioned, I assumed that there was some shaving of bone in different parts of the face. Are there injections or anything that's done as well? Can you just kind of explain a little bit of what is done?
Oh boy. This is it's quite a broad field.
Okay.
There are people that literally I know have spent 100, I know, don't fall out of your chair, 100 to 150,000 trying to make their face look more feminine. I'm just going to give you a couple extremes and I'll tell you what I did. Okay. Sometimes they actually will, cut you from here back, peel your scalp back, your face down, and they literally demolition your forehead and put it back together with metal plates and mesh and stuff like that, to make it look more feminine. And there's some people that literally have their jaw sawed in half and pulled back. Those people that do that it just messes them up for life. A rhinoplasty, which is something everyone has heard of, can do that. Me, I didn't spend near that. Some people I'll just say naturally have a face that could go either way. Mine wasn't. But I had what they call a brow. I had my face cut back and they ground down my brow bone.
Okay.
And sewed me back together and did what's called a scalp advance, where they pull your hairline forward. I had cheek implants. Again, those are multiple ways to do it. Usually they do it from the inside. I didn't have a nose job, but some people do. I did have bone ground off here and on the corners and a lower facelift. Those things like that. Some people have eye lift. You could have your upper lip shortened, have a lip lift. There's some people that go to the extent they go to the dentist and they actually have their teeth shaved down so they're narrower. And the extreme case of those people that I don't know anybody. I've read about it. They even have their legs shortened. I mean, it's just crazy what people do. I mean, when the devil and these delusions get into your mind, I look back and think, what in God's great earth was I doing? And I think it gives me a foretaste of what it says. I believe it's in 2 Timothy about the great delusion and falling away. That when that hits, I have a kind of a foretaste of how strong that delusion can be. Because I look back and think, I cut off my male genitalia. I mean, I can't believe I did that.
Right.
It's just insane. But that's
yeah.
And then I have another thing is you have your voice cords tightened to give you a higher pitch.
Adam's apple shaved, that kind of thing too.
Yeah, all kinds of stuff. I mean, it's just
okay. Well, and one of the things that reminds me of actually is there's a gal who's not a believer who's done her story on the internet a few times as a detransitioner, and one of the things that I remember her talking about in realizing that trying to transition to become a guy, she did that for a period of time. She was on testosterone and moving in that direction, and had a mastectomy, and I think she's had bottom surgery as well, a hysterectomy, and finally, what she realized is that after every movement toward so-called transition, she had this high, this euphoria. When she changed her name to a guy's name, there was something that was euphoric about that. When people began accepting, basically when she was social transitioning and people were affirming that and agreeing with her, there was something about that was euphoric. And then when she had her breast removed, there was something about that was euphoric. When she got on testosterone prior to that, and what she said is finally she realized that with every change there was this high of euphoria, but then the dysphoria would always come back again, and she finally realized that she was dealing with, like, the goalpost moved every time, and so she wasn't actually getting better. She was achieving something, or felt like she was achieving something with each different thing that she would do, but then it would all come back again, and there was that intense desire to do something else. And when you're describing and for her, the lights went on at that point, and she's like, wait a minute, and she detransitioned and re-embraced who she is as a woman, as a girl. And right. Again, not a believer or any of that, but but as you're talking about doing these different, you've had several, I think, different facial feminizations, 4. Yeah.
No, two on my face, bottom and top, and then the last one was just to remove what I could.
Yep. And right. And so, but when you're describing like the people that are going in for multiple facial feminizations, for example, and as they're doing that, and it's now they're going into a dentist to get their teeth, ground and made more narrow, because so there's this obsessive need to try to keep improving and moving further and further toward their ultimate goal, and they're spending massive amounts of money. I think there's so much energy and so much time being lived out in the short space of a human being's lifetime. So much of it is being spent on this stuff that's such a distraction from the eternal, and such a distraction from what's really important. And when I say what's really important, a person who's dealing with real gender dysphoria needs both compassion and help, but not surgery, not going under a scalpel and all of that. We need, as Christians, to be really loving and gracious and supportive, not of them moving further and further away from who God designed them to be, but helping them to resolve mentally, spiritually, at a soul level with how God created them biologically. So
I agree.
But it's the other thing that it reminds me of too, Ted, is, and I wonder if you have anything to kind of add to this, that I've seen some things on the internet, and I won't mention the hospital at the moment, but where there's some things on the internet that for a medical convention, for example, and there are leaders talking about the how much money a doctor or a hospital can bring in through these surgeries, and they are just looking at the numbers, baby, and they are raking in they're raking in the money through children that are confused, adults who are confused. And when you think about how much money you spent, how much more money so many others are spending, I mean, it is just, to me, a disgusting field that is preying on, under the guise of care and safety, and we really want to support the transgender community. It's like, no. And I think there are some who genuinely mean that are confused. But then there's others in the medical field, in the pharmaceutical arena, in the mental health arena, who are just making money hand over fist over these poor kids that are confused. And it's this desire to see this massively growing market for the sake of more and more money. I mean, do you have thoughts about that at all?
Yeah. It brought several things to mind. First, one of the first podcasts I did, the guy mentioned this to me. It's like the light went on. It's like, through my whole life, there was a dark, unseen force, which you or I would, identify as demons or spiritual darkness.
Yeah.
Slowly leading me down this path. It's not like you wake up one day and say, hey, I want to be transgender and cut my body all up. But it's a step by step by step by step. And the thing is, it doesn't matter if it's transgenderism or same-sex attraction or drugs or alcohol or pornography or whatever.
Yep.
It's just like, the enemy giving me and she'll take a mile. And like you said, that lady you referred to, it's like you're always thinking, what can I do more? It's kind of like an obsession to me. I think of it like tattoos. How many tattoos is enough? How many cut-em-ups is enough? And I mean, this is just my opinion. I think the Bible talks about that and discourages cutting your body for any reason other than what's like medically necessary. I mean, just for fun stuff. I that's just me. I can't speak for other people. But I think it's a spiritual thing in it, and there really is. If you do the research, or in the spiritual world, there are people that deal with cutting themselves. It becomes an obsession, and I think whatever these spirits are behind all this that were in me, that was part of it. I mean, to take it to the extreme, you have the recent detransitioner Oli London. He had like 32 facial operations. Michael Jackson, that doctor finally said, you ain't doing this no more.
Yeah.
I mean,
your face isn't going to hold together.
Obsession. And, the forces of darkness and the flesh are just never satisfied. So, those are things to keep in mind. But going back to the cost of this, and yes, that cost can be $1 to $3 million to someone they take down this road. And the travesty is, in most cases in mine, when you go to a therapist, it's only gender affirming.
Right.
It's not like, we have a friend that was healed through conversion therapy when she was young because she had a teacher that took her aside and took her to, the school council, and they dealt with it right. And she's never went down this road, but she was on her way to transitioning. But, conversion therapy and getting effective counseling, can save a lot of people. And another thing, too, is they're pushing this heavily on those with autism or Asperger's syndrome. And it just makes it worse. I mean,
yeah, right.
Where in the medical field do you prescribe something that increases suicide, that cuts body parts off? You don't do that.
Right.
And
right.
I just want to scream, why are we doing this?
Yep.
Because it makes no sense. But like you said, a big motivation.
Follow the money.
I mean, is money, and as we heard in BC, we're getting conditioned to this, and the next step on this train is transhumanism.
Yes.
But that's
so spiritual spiritual darkness, follow the money. And just again, under the guise, that's one of the things that's so frustrating to me is that I think there are some who purport to care about these folks that are dealing with gender dysphoria, or people like myself who once locked into the idea that I was gay and that was my identity and that kind of thing. And there are many people that have a genuine compassion, but their compassion is not based in truth, certainly not biblical truth.
Right.
And but there are others, I think, who are just using the LGBTQ plus community to drive an agenda that is that has nothing to do with care. So the other thing I want to mention too, there are a couple of things. So when you brought up conversion therapy a minute ago, so I want to speak to this for those that are listening or watching. Like, I don't use the phrase conversion therapy in a positive way, simply because the entire term of conversion therapy has always been leveled against believers and those who believe in God's ability to transform lives and that kind of thing. Conversion therapy has always been a negative and pejorative term. The truth is, I
apologize.
That's no. There's nothing. I don't want.
Yeah,
no. You don't have to apologize at all. I think it's great that you brought it up. I'm glad you did, because I want to be able to address it. Is that there is no such thing as conversion therapy. For one thing, there's no therapy. No one goes to school to learn conversion therapy. No one comes out with a degree in conversion therapy. Nobody adds to their repertoire of models of therapy, conversion therapy. The only thing, again, that terminology was coined for was to be a negative, derisive term toward those of us of faith. And so now I understand exactly why you're using it, because you're using it in the positive sense. In other words, with conversion therapy, what people have done who want to use that against Christians or people of faith, and even people who may not be of faith but believe that a person doesn't have to be locked into this idea that homosexuality or gender dysphoria or any of those things are immutable, that change can actually happen.
Right.
That genuine faith in Jesus Christ, genuine pursuit of Him, I believe that is the right path. That's the best path. That's where real transformation is going to happen. That's ultimately where, as transformation happens, like in faith and in walking with Jesus, we are given a new life. We're given a new opportunity to be a part of the kingdom. And so conversion therapy, though, is this idea that somehow all we think is, oh, you can pray the gay away. You can just say this prayer. You can do this spiritual warfare thing. And all of a sudden, poof, it's all gone. And of course, that is not at all what we're saying. What we would say is, yes, of course, as believers in Jesus Christ, prayer is a part of anyone's journey of transformation or walking with God. But they build up conversion therapy is this boogeyman, or is this horrible behavior that, now, back in the 50s or 60s, I think there were some horrible things that were done to those who were caught, as homosexual men, for example, or that kind of thing. And none of us would agree with shameful or harmful behavior, or chemically castrating a guy that has same-sex attraction or was found sleeping with another guy or whatever. Those are not things that we would agree with at all. But when we say that we believe that Jesus has the power to change lives, that's called conversion therapy, and we're regarded as quacks and as ones who want to do harm to those who come to us for help and support. So rather than referring to conversion therapy, I think that the friend that you mentioned was simply able to receive some common sense therapy. Let's call it that, right? Some common sense.
I would agree. That's what she would say.
Yeah, exactly. And so, I totally, again, I'm glad that you brought it up that way, because I think that many Christians are getting caught up in this idea, oh, there's such a thing as conversion therapy. And the idea then of ever trying to help somebody who comes to us for assistance as a licensed counselor, as a pastor, as a friend, as a mom or dad or whatever, that, like, for example, in Canada, the bill up there that was signed into law, C4, a couple of years ago, outlaws anyone, not just a counselor, pastor, anybody from actually participating in any kind of process that will help somebody break through same-sex attraction or gender dysphoria. You can push them in that direction. So in a sense, conversion therapy happens, but it only happens in the direction of pushing people toward LGBTQ, as opposed to if they have a desire to walk in faith, if they have a desire to not give into or live out same-sex attraction or gender dysphoria or anything within the LGBTQ plus acronym, if they have a desire not to do that and they come looking for help, we believe that they ought to be able to find that in a supportive talk therapy session with a licensed, well-equipped counselor, or in prayer with a pastor or friend or somebody in the body of Christ. And here we have a whole country that has outlawed that. And there are plenty of people in the U.S. who would love to outlaw that as well, and try to silence the truth that Jesus Christ is still transforming lives today.
Yeah, because what you said, that's a home run. And see, really, one of the things I have to investigate a little bit further is, and I just learned this recently, we're in D.C., is the root of all this may have been just a fetish. Arousal from women's clothes for whatever reason. And, our friend Walt Heyer, he says it's important to get the message out that not always is the, quote, answer, transgenderism. It could be that if I had, back in the day, been able to go to a biblical Christian-based counselor and dealt with that, I could have saved me a lot of pain and money, and as you said, the years that locusts ate up.
Yep.
And we need to be willing to deal with that and not just shove everyone, down this crazy road. But like you said, part of mine was demonic deliverance, but that was just the first step. Then the other step is, learning to walk who I am in Jesus. Neil Anderson has some great courses out there called Freedom of Christ that just are so transformational that, you can find local places that teach that on the internet.
Yep.
You have a ministry, and there's others that teach the truth that, we get our minds screwed up. We believe a lie. And then once we get back in the Word and see who God made us, you unravel all this mess, and then you have peace and clarity.
Yes.
As Jesus says, you have a single eye to Him, and, won't say all these temptations go away, but we have the tools in our toolkit to deal with them, because I know you tell me the same thing. Anytime you go down this road, whether it be whatever LGBT, the payback is very negative. It's not good. There's nothing good about it. So affirming it is not the answer. And, that's one of the things I said on a podcast a week ago, is that it seems like the church, unfortunately, is ill-equipped to deal with this. And I always feel like the Lord wants me to tell people that if you're a family member and you have someone that's in the far country, whether it be this or what you went through or just other stuff, there's three things to keep in mind. One, pray for them.
Yep.
Pray for them. And number two, never give up. And the third one is love them like crazy with boundaries. I know of one guy that was prayed for 40 years before he came back to the Lord. My family prayed for me 12 years, and my friends before I came back to the Lord.
Yes.
And, my sister didn't know what was going to happen when I came on March 14th, 2021. I didn't either. You just never know when God's going to, open the door and set you free.
Yeah.
But then you have to keep walking. You can't stop. It's not just a deliverance. And you have to know the Savior and get involved in a good Bible study, a good church, and people that will love you and mentor you, you keep growing in Christ. And it's a lifelong thing. Again, it doesn't matter what I just said, whether, they're a drug addict, pornography, alcoholic, whatever. You never know when God is going to change their life. And, the idea of the 12 steps of, being accountable and all that stuff is so important. So,
that's good.
Just kind of the thing I want to share with it. But pushing people down the gender affirming is not wrong. I mean, if I just take off my Christian hat and look at it secularly, as a minimum with these people, we need to do balance. For whatever reason, there's people like me that were literally hell-bent on going down this road, and you're not going to stop them. But at the same time, if I had been to a counselor for 2 years and she had possibly not done just gender affirming, but really digging in and finding my fetishes and dealing with that, if that was really what it was, I might be saving myself a lot of pain and agony.
Yeah, and, if you could actually explore the idea earlier on of options and what the power of God can do, and I instead of being now in a situation that we're in these days, where the only option, more and more, the only option that is being pushed, and now there's legislation trying to back this up and encroaching further and further on both our rights of free speech and freedom of religion and those kinds of things. And if all you hear is a positive message on going down this so-called road of transition, and it's celebrated, it's glorious, it's wonderful, and anybody that disagrees is prudish and cruel and hateful. When that kind of messaging is out there, it's understandable why so many young people and even older adults are feeling like, no, this is really my only choice. But again, it's not by accident. It's not because people are everyone is ignorant. It's because there are some driving forces that are making, both from a demonic perspective, as spiritual perspective, as well as a money perspective, there's an advantage to getting more and more people on this conveyor belt. So I don't want to keep beating that dead horse, but the other thing I want to mention is ironically a little bit, you brought up Neil Anderson, love his work. And we just did a podcast. Gosh, it would have been when we were at the American Association of Christian Counselors Conference. We did about 7 podcasts. And one of the guys that we interviewed there is the president of Freedom in Christ Ministries USA. And Dan Stude, who had been a friend of mine even prior to him taking on that role. And we love the work of Neil Anderson. And so it might be fun. You can even go back and look up that one and just listen to what Dan shared. He shared really openly and vulnerably. And we, love that. The other thing I wanted to come back and just chat about a little bit is you talked about, and so importantly, that you weren't the only one affected by this. And obviously you've been massively affected by this, but your family, your friends, your family especially, right? I feel so many times within the LGBT community, and for those of us who come out, when I look back on my coming out and so many others that I've known, it's like we just put blinders on toward the feelings of everybody else, toward the pain in the process they have to walk through. And all we really care about is ourselves, and doing what we want to do, and kind of to hell with how anybody feels about it, how much it hurts them, damages them, grieves them because they love us. We don't really care about that, or at least that's the case that I've seen. That's a situation I've seen so many times over, as well as in my own life. So could you talked about it some for sure, but what do you want to say to family members whose heart is really heavy aching for their son, their daughter, their brother, their sister, their mom, their dad, their wife, their husband, whatever, who's very much gone off the rails and turned away from what they know to be true, and has just kind of abandoned people? What do you want to say? What would you want to say to folks who are hurting over decisions like I made and decisions like you made?
So first, I want to say that I totally agree that going down this road is totally selfish. Totally selfish. It's totally the antithesis of what Jesus called to do, where he says, even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to give his life a ransom for many. So his idea was to serve, and there's nothing but self-serving in this. And to give you the case in point is when I transitioned in basically full-time, 100% in 2011, a year later, my dad died. My sister had never seen me in my new persona. And my dad died in November of 2012, which is, about 11 years ago. And she said, after I came back to the Lord, that she grieved 2 deaths, literally 2 deaths.
Right.
Her father died and her brother died. And she said they both felt the same.
Wow. So
the point I'm making is that we feel our pain, but as John Donne says, a man is not an island unto himself, and we forget we're connected. I have a brother, a sister, I have 5 children, I have cousins and friends and people I grew up with, and it just devastated them, But of course, like you said, the only thing I could think of was making Ted, Teresa, and me being happy, because I was under the delusion that, do you want a live daughter? He was really a boy, or do you want a dead child? And neither one of those is true. It's just a big farce.
Yep.
But what I would say is, one, people do this, as I say, because they have a hole in their soul. Something is not right.
Yeah.
And in most cases, well, I would say all cases, it's something inside these people. It's not you. It wasn't my mother. It wasn't my dad, my brother, my sister, any of my children. It wasn't my friends. It was just me. I'm the one that has a problem, and I did not own the problem and deal with it properly. So first of all, is that please don't shame yourself into thinking you're doing something wrong, especially if it's an adult, like a sibling or an uncle or aunt.
Who are you speaking to when you say that? Don't shame yourself thinking who are you speaking to when you mention that?
Well, what I'm saying is if you have a brother or a sister, or I would say an adult son or daughter or nephew that's going down that, don't think it's your fault or your family's fault. It's probably nothing you did wrong. It's a decision they made. Ultimately, we have to stand before God for ourselves, not for someone else. However, I do say, in this current environment we live in, sometimes parents have to grow a backbone. And we have to, I'm not saying you got to, but in some cases, I know of parents that have a child that's got this crazy idea they're transgender. They had to take the cell phone away. They had to pull them out of school and homeschool them. But if that saves the life of your child, you may need to do that. Tough love is not fun. Johnny or Susie may scream and yell like a demoniac, but as a parent, that is your right, and you're actually saving their life. As it says in Jude, sometimes you got to snatch them back off the road to hell, but love them with grace and mercy. So, that's kind of the idea I would say. But again, if it's an adult that's doing this, like I was at age 50, like I said earlier, pray, never give up, love them like crazy.
Yep.
That doesn't mean you affirm
with boundaries.
It doesn't mean you call them, like my brother and sister called me Ted, not my fake name Teresa. I don't, embracing a lie just makes it worse. Don't do that. I'll just say there have been people in a same-sex relationship that wanted to come spend the night at my house. I said, that's fine, but you spend it in 2 different bedrooms. I don't recognize this person as your other than as your friend.
Mm-hmm.
And, there may be boundaries. My sister and brother, I quit getting invited to family functions. So, the big thing is poking them in the eye. And, the proverbial, you're going to hell.
Right.
It's probably not really effective.
No. It may be effective in pushing them in the opposite direction, but yeah.
Well, that's what I'm saying. At the same time, you can, kind of give them the same message. It's like, I don't agree with you. I don't think that behavior is biblical. But, yelling and screaming at them is probably not going to, as I say, you catch more flies with sugar than you do with vinegar.
Yep.
But it doesn't mean a pansy love and, agreeing with them. And, one of the hardest things this younger generation has to figure out, and I had to explain this to my granddaughter, you can love someone and not agree with them.
Yes.
An example I used to her is when I was growing up, this was in the 60s, 70s, everybody smoked. Just about every adult smoked, on TV. My doctor recommends Lucky Strike cigarettes.
Right.
But I hated it. I hated the smell of smoke, and to this day, never smoked because they cured me of it before it ever got to me.
Mm-hmm.
But, I asked my granddaughter, do you think I hated my parents because I smoked? No, I loved them. I loved them like crazy. And, it's the same thing, whether it's, LGBTQ, whatever it may be. Mm-hmm. You can love the person, but disagree with what they're doing. It doesn't mean you don't love them.
Right.
And that's just an important thing, especially the younger generation doesn't understand. But did I kind of hit on what you're...
Yeah, no, right. I think what you're sharing, I just think you're sharing out of your own experience and out of others that you've known, and your story is so important because you've been there. You've gone through the full quote unquote transition. And could you have done more? Yeah, you could have, because again, like we said, you can do so much that there's no finishing line basically what this could actually look like. But you realized at some point, no, this is not, this isn't ever going to, similar to the girl I was talking about in a sense, this isn't going to take me ultimately where I want to go. And also, I just want to mention too, I know you talked about like the time that your sister prayed for you and how vital that was. And in the moment, like as she's praying, nothing really seemed to be happening. You weren't even, you got up and you left. It didn't really think that much of it necessarily. And it was as you were going, and for whatever reason, your dad having mentioned this sports complex, and you decide that day to go, I don't know. I have no idea what that had to do with anything. I don't think you know what that had to do with anything. But here you are driving around this thing. And as you're doing that, you're having these manifestations of weeping and feeling like you were getting squeezed to death, and that you're experiencing something that you understand to have been like spiritual darkness, demonic forces coming out of you, coming away from you, and then some of the evidence of the reality of that is how your mind cleared afterward. And one of the things I just want to mention is that, when I also came out of the LGBT world and I came to a church in upstate New York and began, I was very serious finally, not just like sticking my toe in the water and assessing how everybody felt about me. And man, I'm out of here. And I was so easily offended about everything and anything under the sun, as so many of us are. And really wasn't that serious about a faith journey or walking with Christ or any of that until this point. And I decided, I dove into this church because the pastor knew my struggles and said, hey, if you want to move back here from Chicago, where I was living at the time, we'll walk with you. But I got into a small group right away. And then I also got into counseling. And one of the types of counseling that this church was known for was spiritual warfare. They also had great discipleship and those kinds of things, which that's the other piece that I think you're speaking about rightly, is that, well, let me just say it this way. I needed, no doubt in my mind, I needed to take authority back over my own life, where I had given authority in specific areas of my life. Even as a Christian, I had given authority to Satan. I didn't say it that way, but by my behaviors, by my sinful, rebellious, sexual behaviors, repeatedly, I set up a stronghold, or allowed him to set up a stronghold where he had authority in several key areas of my life that I could not. I could have made the right decision in, but I believe when a Christian has a stronghold, it isn't that they can't make the right decision. It's that it feels so stinking hard to make the right decision. And it's like the enemy has kind of a Trojan horse set up in that area, and has been given authority by us in that area. So I definitely believe that I needed the counseling that I received to rebuke and take authority once again over my own life, to boot these spirits out. I'm not saying I was possessed, but the Bible doesn't even use that language. It uses the language of being demonized. But I do think I was demonized because of my behavior. But in addition, and we talked about this before even starting the podcast, but I think this is an important point to make, is it seems to me like certain groups within the church, certain denominations tend to have a bent that, it's all about spiritual warfare. It's all about rebuking the demon of homosexuality or whatever. And honestly, when I hear that, my eyes kind of roll, not because I don't believe that there's demonic forces at work in all kinds of areas of sexual sin and otherwise. I do, but it's because that's not the only issue. There are those demonic strongholds that need to be broken in our lives, as you also described and experienced with your sister and afterward, and I experienced too. But then there's also this process of discipleship, like getting into the Word, walking with others, beginning to grow, beginning to mature, continuing that process of maturation over the long haul. And part of that also, I would say, in addition to spiritual warfare and discipleship, I think that one of the things that I didn't learn or wasn't exposed to until much later in life, until like I was 38, 39 years of age, is also the reality that most of us are frankly, I think all of us are carrying around wounds, emotional, soul level wounds that we've had unless the church has taught us, we've had no idea that the blood of Christ can actually heal and break the power of those wounds as well. And those wounds are massive drivers in our confusion, in our pursuit of solutions, in our pursuit of, I just want to feel better. And so if it's looking at porn and masturbating, or it's believing that I'm in the wrong body, or whatever that I'm going to turn to food or alcohol. The reality is there's wounds that really drive those places. So for me, I feel like understanding the need for spiritual warfare, the need for discipleship, and the need to really deal with these places of wounding. When you have a more holistic approach of those three core areas, I think a church is much more balanced, and a person is much more helped by addressing those three core areas than just one of those alone.
No, I totally agree. And, you couldn't say it, better than myself. And I agree, and I won't necessarily say that elegantly, but, I guess another thing I would say is that, when people have a very dramatic encounter with God, or darkness, or a life-changing event, that trauma, it can be a good trauma or a bad trauma. It's just like recently, just like the Lord said or gave me the idea, or whatever, however you want to say it, that, when we come to these critical junctures, it's our response. Do we embrace God?
Yes.
Or do we embrace sin?
Yes.
And when I had these feelings, I didn't know it. I wish I would have known a tenth of what I know now.
Yep.
And, but praise God nowadays that if I felt this way now, there's ministry like yours and other people that are out there to help people. Whereas, 50 years ago, there was nothing.
Right.
There was nothing.
Yeah. When I was wrestling, there was nothing. Yeah. Yep.
because it just leads me to say one thing. I don't want to leave this out. It's so critical for parents to teach their children the truth.
Yes.
Male, female. And all this other stuff is hogwash. It's important for a church to do that.
Yep.
And we don't hear it. It's important for a church to address this.
Yep.
I mean,
there's a glory being made in the image of God as male or female. There's a glory. There's a joy. Yes. There's purpose in those understandings, and we need to pour that into our children so that when they are exposed to these other lies, frankly, they have something within them that's like, wait a minute, that doesn't. No, I know that my body and my person as a boy or a girl has real meaning, and it's not incidental.
Yeah, I mean, we could go on forever. And, I guess I just say that if any pastors are listening to this, this needs to be addressed.
Yep.
Because in the near future, there's going to be a big backwash of people coming out of this experiment.
Right.
And churches are ill-equipped. Just a few thoughts that come to my mind is, if Johnny comes to church in a dress, don't poke him in the eye. I love that church in Texas that says, come as you are, but don't stay that way. We need to walk along with these people that are really seeking, like you said, to embrace them, and not in affirming it, but I mean, as far as, working with them, talking to them, being willing to say, hey, we offer this, if you're interested. And
building a relationship to start with, right?
And then, dealing with the change, if they come to Christ, some people like me, it's immediate. Other people, it's like my friend Billy, it took him like 2 years. God told him one day that I finally got some clay. He was seeking God, and he was in the church for over a year till he finally went back to what I call original. But, we need to be ready and willing, to do that. And the key thing is just the gospel, the power of the gospel.
Yep. Right.
Christ died for sin once for all, the just for the unjust, in order that he might bring us to God. Believing the gospel, not just believing, but repenting, which means turning away.
Yes.
Instead of walking towards being transgender, walk back towards who God created us, or whatever it may be.
Yep, that's true.
And,
Ted, one of the things I wanted to, and if there's a final thought there you want to throw in, by all means do that. But I don't want to end the podcast until we have a chance, or until you have a chance to maybe share a little bit about your heart of wanting to be a resource to the church on these very topics. So I believe that you'd be more than willing to do some video, conversations, or some Q&A with pastoral leadership teams. So our ministry exists primarily to equip the church and to equip pastors and leaders, not so much to work with individuals who are struggling. I mean, we point people in the direction of other ministries that do that, and we love to help individuals. But what we feel like we can help individual strugglers far more if we're helping the church become a safe and transformational environment and give them the tools to work. And again, it's not just about LGBTQ, it's about heterosexual sexual brokenness as well. So, but for you, how would you like to serve the church or help pastors or Christian leaders, or what's on your heart for how you'd like the Lord to kind of utilize you in the story that He's brought you through and out of?
Yeah, right now that's still kind of developing.
Okay.
But, I think we as Christians, a lot of times we don't take advantage of our citizenship.
Good way of saying it.
And that's a very important thing. And a lot of people say, well, just whatever the government says, I'll obey. But, I think about the Apostle Paul. He appealed to Caesar. He used his rights as a citizen. He wasn't afraid to throw out his citizen of Rome card and say, I want to appeal to Caesar. He did. He went all the way to Caesar. So why am I saying that? I said, this is not just church. It's like myself and others. I've testified in the state of Florida for help not harm bills. I have been part of legal cases, to get this medical conversion, medical treatment affirming transgenderism, thrown out of states. I went to Louisiana, and, if we have more time, I could share that. That law was passed. And I,
protecting children, basically, isn't it?
Yeah.
Without getting
harm bills.
Yep. Right.
I mean, it's important to do that, to, use my story in state legislators.
Yep.
Locally, I belong to a group, and we're fighting the perversion of public libraries. We can't sit back anymore, Gary. It's getting too late. If we don't get off our fannies and get really busy with while we have opportunity to do these things, it's going to be too late.
Right.
We'll be another Germany, another Russia. And pastors, if you hear this, you can't stand back in your church and just preach. You got to get out there and assert your citizenship duties, or whatever that may be. A library, a state legislator. I mean, Gary and I went to
school board,
and I talked to my senators and my congressmen. I mean, we've got to be as loud as our enemy and more loud. So,
with love and compassion, but putting it out there, right?
Well, using our citizenship card, which we have a right as Americans to do.
Sure, absolutely.
So that's a big part of my heart. Another part of my heart is this. I spoke at some conferences, and I have upcoming with my sister to share in a church. You may have heard about it. About 2.5 weeks ago, a pastor in Smith Station, Alabama, took his life because he was a closet cross-dresser. There's a lot more to it than that. But to share with people what is really going on. Because so many people, they just don't realize how vicious this is. I mean, and for me to get that out in the church setting. Another thing, I've talked to some people a little bit one-on-one, but that hasn't happened too much. But I'm, glad to do that. And in the future, there's a program coming out by a church group that I hope I can be part of, to be able to do kind of like what you do, to help equip churches to, help their youth, help adults. How do we help our youth? How do we as church, when these people start coming back in looking for answers, what can we do?
Right.
That's what's on my heart.
Well, how can people contact you, Ted, if someone listening to this, or do you have a way for people to reach out and contact you as a pastor, or even as somebody who may be struggling and feels like they can in some fashion relate to your story? Is there a way that they can connect with you?
Yeah, the easiest way is just to email. I'll give it to you and you can post it. It's not very difficult. It's my name, TED, a period, the letter H, another period, and HALLEY, like Halley's Comet, at iCloud.com. I've gotten several emails already from a podcast I did about a month ago.
Great.
So I don't have a website like you, maybe in the near future, but I'm working with some other people, and we're still in the formative stages of figuring out, how we can fit into this battle.
Okay, well, we'll be sure to put up the printed version of your email as well, so people can reach out to you. So, Ted, thank you so much for being here, and this has been incredibly informative. We will definitely break this very long form interview and discussion into 2 parts, and put it out there on our website, and also you can post it on yours, but or not on yours, but in whatever way you're putting out podcasts or things like that. So again, super happy that you were here. So grateful for the work that God has done and is doing in your life and the way that he's using you. So thanks so much, Ted.
Thank you, Gary.
Yeah. Hey, for those of you who are tuning in and listening to this podcast or watching this podcast, we're so grateful that you're here. We're grateful that you took the time out to tune in and listen. Hopefully this has been something that has either helped you as a mom or a dad or a loved one for someone who's wrestling or struggling, or if you yourself are wrestling or struggling. We would certainly love to be a resource in pointing you in a direction of a church or a ministry that we may know of, even if it's an online contact where you can receive some pastoral care, some help, some support. You can certainly, any of the resources that we know of, you can also find on our website that we direct people to, and then just leave it up to them to decide if that resource is a good support for them or not. So, but we are hopeful that these podcasts do give you some help, some support, some guidance, and we do pray that that God is able, through the stories that you hear here and the discussions that we're having, that God is able to really reveal himself more fully to you, to break through the deception, to break through the ways that the enemy has miscast God and made him in some ways look like the enemy. And so we really want to pull back the curtains and say, no, God really is the one who is loving. God really is the one. He's the one who leaves the 99 sheep that are doing just fine. And he goes after me and after Ted and after you who are wrestling and struggling and wandering. And he wants to bring you back into a place of genuine fellowship and genuine family in his body, and to give you meaningful purpose that has eternal value. So again, thanks for joining us. We look forward to seeing you in a future podcast. We so appreciate the time you've just invested with us in our Transforming Congregations podcast. To join us for future podcasts, dial into transformingcongregations.org/podcast, and we look forward to seeing you in a future podcast.